to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Jeff Sitz, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to it.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our international audience where you grew up, where you went to school, your first job, etc.
Well, I am in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm in the suburb Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, but I've lived in Milwaukee or been here almost all my life. I have a long, unlike many other people, I've had a long association with just one school. When I was born, my dad was already teaching at Wisconsin Lutheran High School, which is then where I went to school, and then where I got my first coaching and teaching job, and where I just retired last year as athletic director. So I've been associated with Wisconsin Lutheran High School literally my entire life. So I grew up here, went to elementary school at the Little St. John's here in Wauwatosa, and then on to Wisconsin Lutheran. After that, I went to the University of Wisconsin Parkside. Wisconsin has a diverse number of campuses around the country, or around the state, I should say. And I went to the UW Parkside, which is down in Kenosha, Wisconsin, just on the border, a little bit north of Chicago, south of Milwaukee, that kind of thing. And I went there and ran track and field, and led me to a connection where I went to graduate school. Parkside did not have an indoor track facility, even though I was there on a track scholarship. They did not have an indoor facility. So we would go to the communities, Racine and Kenosha, and use the high school tracks when they were done. So we would go on and so on. And I got to know all the high school track coaches in the Racine, Kenosha area pretty well. And a guy by the name of Bill Greighton said to me, hey, he said, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I said, well, I'd like to coach track someplace. And he said, well, if you're interested, he said, if you want a graduate assistantship, he said, I know a guy by the name of Art Harvey who's at Eastern Kentucky University. And he said, that would be the place for you to go. He said, one word from me and you'd be in. And I'd say, well, okay, that sounds good. So when I graduated from Parkside, I worked for another year, get a little bit of money, and then went back to Bill Greighton, and he hooked me up with Art Harvey, and off to Eastern Kentucky I went. The interesting thing about that, Hutch, was that Art Harvey called me about a week before I head down to Richmond, Kentucky, and said, hey, I'm no longer the track coach. He said, I took a different position here at the university. And so he said, you're set. He said, in fact, he said, we're going to intensify. He said, you're not only going to be the grad assistant for track and field, you're going to be the grad assistant for cross country as well. He said, we are trying to hire someone right now. And he said, until he gets on campus, you're going to be in charge of the cross country teams as well, men's and women's cross country. So I added that to my resume really quickly. I got down there a week early so I could be in connection with them. And Art Harvey wrote most of the workouts, but I was the person in charge of getting him to the course, getting him to practice, executing practices and stuff. And about the time that the new head coach came, Rick Erdman, that was he took over for the last few weeks of cross country and then track. So anyway, that was an interesting experience. Art Harvey had this deal. He had never had a graduate assistant who did not get a Division I job the next year. A guy by the name of Grover Hinsdale was the grad assistant the year before I got there, and he went to Georgia Tech as an assistant, and then he took over at Georgia Tech coaching track and so on. My situation was really different. Having, Rick Erdman was living out of a hotel room while his wife was trying to sell their home back in Hagerstown, Maryland. And I kind of fell between the cracks a little bit in terms of getting a position. So now we could do a whole show on this. My first job, my first position was at Evergreen Lutheran High School. My wife and I got married in the summer, and we went out to Evergreen Lutheran High School in Tacoma, Washington, and I was the girls' dormitory supervisor. And I did not misspeak. It was the girls' dormitory. So my wife and I had an apartment in this dormitory complex that they had, and Karen had lots of rules for the girls. If you don't want to be seen in it, don't wear it, and all these kinds of things. So anyway, that was my first experience. That was my first job. So Karen and I were at Evergreen Lutheran High School for 1 year, and then I've been back at Wisconsin Lutheran High School for the next 41, and retired at the end of 2022.
That's incredible. And so your father was a teacher there, and so it's not only your alma mater, but you might be the first guest who's went to their alma mater, teaches at their alma mater, and one of their parents was a teacher there before you got there. So that is incredible.
At some point, I think I was in 7th grade, my dad had an opportunity to go to a college to teach. He was the chairman of the English department. And one night at supper, he asked what I thought about this. He said, I know we haven't talked about it as a family, but he said, I know I have this opportunity. And I said, well, I'll miss you. I said, when you leave, because I said, you've raised me since I was a little kid to be a Wisconsin Lutheran Viking. And I said, come on now, you can't move away and take that away from me. So he ended up not taking the job. I don't think it had anything to do with my thoughts or feelings or persuasive powers, but I was happy he stayed in Wisconsin.
Interesting. Talk for a minute about the opportunity you had to play youth sports in suburban Milwaukee.
Well, that's another interesting twist in my life. So my parents are both from New Ulm, Minnesota, south central Minnesota, around Mankato, maybe about 100 miles south of Minneapolis. And so their parents were still alive. So there's a college associated with our church body, training pastors and teachers in that town. And so my dad would go there every summer and teach summer school. So as soon as we were out of grade school, my sister and I would hop in the car and we would literally drive to New Ulm, Minnesota, and spend our entire summers there. And that went on from the time I was born until I was in 7th grade. I think my 8th grade year, my dad finally got something else to do during the summer other than teach summer school. So we would head up to New Ulm, Minnesota. And I mean, I played Little League baseball there and took swimming lessons there, and whatever my cousins did and my aunt and uncle had planned for us, that was pretty much what I did. So I grew up, doing things in New Ulm, Minnesota, and it was a lot different than Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for sure. A town of about 14,000 people by comparison to, Metro Milwaukee's maybe 1 million people. But my high school was, 3 sports. I played football, basketball, and track and field. Track and field was kind of my thing. I was on the football team and got a chance to play a little bit. It was, a quarterback growing up, and then all of a sudden they discovered that there were a lot better candidates for that. So I had a little bit of speed, so they moved me to wide receiver, and it was okay. I mean, I had a decent experience. My good friend Arnie always used to say to me as I was a wide receiver, Hutch, he'd say, Jeff, you got hands like a toilet seat. Everything goes right through. That was his comment on my football abilities. So, I enjoyed that. And basketball, I was on the team because I was an athlete, I think. But, it was track and field where I had most of my experience and success and fun, I guess I would say. My dad was a coach, so I always kind of wanted to be a coach. I just saw how much he enjoyed it, and the response that he had, the relationships that he had with kids. So that was always a big thing for me. Always wanted to be a coach.
Excellent. I know you've already mentioned a few of them, but talk about some of the mentors and leaders in your life that made a difference for you, younger and older.
When I was in high school, I had a lot of coaches, and I respected the coaches because they they were so concerned being at a Lutheran school. They were so concerned about my spiritual upbringing, my, my moral compass and so on. And I had a lot of respect for those people. And I knew most of my coaches and teachers at the high school. It was a school of about 1,000 kids. I knew most of them as kind of my aunts and uncles. I kind of grew up knowing them. And so when I went to the first day of freshman football practice or basketball practice or whatever, it wasn't like I was encountering somebody that I had never seen or met or been around before. And so, from that standpoint, I really respected a lot of the coaches and teachers that I had at school. They were personal to me. Outside of Wisconsin Lutheran High School, my first real influence was a guy by the name of Bob Lawson. Bob was the track coach at UW Parkside. I had really never met him before. And the more I got to know about him, the more fascinating he was to me. He had been a decathlete at USC when he went to college back in the 50s. And so his good friends were like Rayford Johnson and people like that. And he would tell stories about how after track practice was over at UCLA and USC, they would go later on at night and sneak onto they'd either climb the fences at USC or they'd climb the fences at UCLA and get onto the practice tracks. And then they would do stuff like they would have 2-step high jump competitions. And, the bar would open at 6 feet 2 inches. And if you couldn't 2-step and this was not back in the days of the flop, this was back in the days of the Western straddle, the Western roll. So, he would tell outrageous stories about how they would do things. And Bob was kind of an expert when it came to track and field. We had race walkers and hammer throwers and all that back in the 70s. It was an NAIA school at the time, which at the time I was there was kind of like a Division II program, I guess I would say. I don't think the NAIA probably is in the same league today, but it was really good. And so, Bob Lawson was just, Bob was just an outstanding coach for me to have. He was so technical and just knew things about, you could talk to him about pole vaulting, about hurdling, about long jumping, whatever it was. And Bob just knew he had so much up in his head. He had coached at Iowa State, and then he and his wife had been at the Naval Academy for a while as the men's and women's coach there. He did a lot of overseas mentoring and programs. The U.S. Sports Academy that's out of the southeast part of the country, he helped found that with Tom Rosandich and people. He would have stuff in his office. They had written complete training programs for the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers back in the day. And he was just an encyclopedia of training and track and field and history and technique. And he was really an important person for me. And beyond my coaching days, there have been so many people I've met along the way that I've run into. One of the coaches that was on my staff, Dale Waltz, had a big impact on me, and his family continues to be important at our school and coaching and so on. In fact, his son took over for me as athletic director when I moved on. Jack Runholz, who I got to know along the way, met at Evergreen Lutheran High School and been a lifelong friend. Just people like that have just, been great touchstones for me when I've run into situations along the way that I didn't quite know how to handle. Just always knew that there were people to call, people to touch base with and so on. And I guess the last group of mentors that I would have to be, people like you that I've met through my NIAAA days, Rich Barton and yourself, and Rich Burchard, Phil Risen, those kind of people. It's just, fantastic, the impact that people like you have had as I've grown up along the way. I wish I could have, gotten into the NIAAA a lot sooner than I did in life. We can talk about that, I guess, a little bit better, but a lot of important people that have really been significant in my time, and people that I could call and touch base with, and it's really been great.
Let me ask you a personal question, Jeff. What's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
Well, two things that I think really jump out at me. Number one, maybe like every athletic director would say or should say, I guess one of my biggest regrets is not spending more time with my family and spending so much time invested at our school and in the job. Wisconsin Lutheran was always a little bit more than just a job to me because of my personal connection to it for so long. And my mom used to tell this story about my dad, and she would say, before outside of Jesus, Carlton has two great loves, Wisconsin Lutheran High School and me, and I'm never quite sure of the pecking order. And I think that's pretty much what my wife would say if you would ask her too. I mean, it just, I probably spent way too much time there. And as I look today, one of the things that athletic directors, coaches, and so on today maybe don't put in the same amount of time, and certainly they put in the effort, but maybe not the same amount of time. And once in a while that frustrates me. But then at the same time, I remember that they probably have their priorities a little bit better than I always had them. There were way too many times that I probably should have been at home instead of just sitting at school doing mindless things. I think the other great disappointment or the other great failure, I guess, that I have is I went to my very first NIAAA national conference when it was here in Milwaukee in 1984. I was asked to help the current athletic director at our school, and I eagerly did that. And so I went to the NIAAA conference here, and I mean, I was astounded at everything that was available to me. And it wasn't until a long time later, way near the end of my career, that I really got a chance to be involved with the NIAAA. And I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have done that sooner. I wish I would have made the effort and they had the impetus to get involved with the NIAAA sooner than I did. So I guess what I've learned from that is, when something's available to you, when you see something out there, don't be afraid to take that that leap and move forward and try something that may be a little bit outside your comfort zone. And I guess going back to my first one, I just think that encourage athletic directors to make good decisions about their family time, and their job.
Thanks for sharing that. You bring up the 1984 conference. I had no idea until right now that Milwaukee had hosted an NIAAA conference, because that was certainly long before my first conference, which was back in '97 in Orlando. Nashville.
Okay, Nashville. The interesting thing was, and I don't know what stroke of luck they had there, but the entire time period of that, it was 60 degrees in Milwaukee every day that winter. And I mean, that's we've got a 50-degree day today, and that's pretty good, but the weather was just outstanding. And then a couple years later, Hutch, it was in Chicago, and there was no hotel associated with the convention center, so everybody had to walk. And I mean, there was 11 inches of snow the one day, and I think 4 inches of snow 2 days later. And I mean, people were it was really tough. It was a tough sledding. I think that's the last time they were ever up in this neck of the woods here in for the
I'm
NIAAA.
sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a minute about your journey with WADA, how you got involved with the state association, and from there, how you got more involved. You talked about you went to the 1984 conference, but didn't become involved later. So talk about how that all happened.
Well, in the state of Wisconsin, when I first was athletic director, there were separate associations for public schools and private schools. And in fact, the Private School Association in Wisconsin had started out as a Catholic school only organization. And I think it was 1972, they allowed other parochial and private schools to join them. So I kind of started out with a group called the Wisconsin Independent Schools Athletic Directors Association, WISADA. And that was an organization just for private school ADs. And mostly the reason that it existed was because you had to have a forum for talking about state tournaments and things like that, which was a separate issue at the time. And WISA was for private schools and the WIAA was for public schools. And so we could always belong to WADA. That's always been an organization that's existed. That's for all the athletic directors in the state. But then we would also have the smaller WISADA group to deal with private school things. So that's how I really started. And then WISADA had a board position on the Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association board. And so Don Tolkach had that position for the first like 10 years of existence. And then I took over and I had that, I think, for 10 or 12 years that I served as the private school liaison to the WIAA board, or to the Wisconsin Athletic Directors Board. And then in 2000, some state legislation kind of forced a hand, but the WIAA got out in front of it, and Doug Chickering was the association director at that time. And so public and private schools were put together in the same state athletic organization. We were all members of the WIAA. The private school state tournaments went away, that association went away, and so we disbanded the Private School Athletic Director Association in 2000 as well. So then in 2004, I ran for a board position on WADA's board, and I was successful. I routed my opponent. There was no opponent. I was the only guy running, but you know how that goes.
Yeah.
But so anyway, I got on the board then, and I was president of WADA in 2006. Past president in 2007. And so that was really my involvement with WADA. And then from there, one day, Greg Harvey, who's currently our assistant executive director, he was the president of the board at the time, and Greg Smith, who was the executive director then, called me and said, "Hey, Jeff, we have this opportunity and we think you'd be perfect for it. Do you want to accept a position on the NIAAA board as the Section 4 representative?" So Wisconsin's turn to host, to appoint someone to that position. And I talked and mostly just listened in that conversation. And the next day I called Greg back and I said, "Greg, let me get this right. You're asking me to serve on the NIAAA board." And I mean, it took me back to my days of 1984 and having gone to that conference. And I went to as many conferences as I could in between. I think I've been to 26 or 27 national conferences over the years. And I was just flabbergasted. I wasn't quite sure I had understood them right, but I had, and they were asking me to serve on that NIAAA board. And that has been just an unbelievable experience. I was on the board. I started in 2015, right after the national conference, and then was on the board for 2 years and ran for president and was successful. So I served as the president of the NIAAA in 2018 and then rotated off the board at the end of the 2019 conference. And now I've had opportunities other than that to I'm on the accreditation committee with your friend Holly, and that's been exciting. And I was asked to serve now on the strategic plan, the next strategic plan that's coming up. I'll be heading the finance portion of that committee. So I can't tell you how that experience with the NIAAA, just getting to know people like you and others from around the country, it's been fantastic. I wish I would have gotten involved a lot sooner.
Let me ask you about if you've got any favorite stories about your time on the board. I know you and Big Rich were close friends, and you followed him as the president, but having served on the board myself, I know each board is separate, but you really get some great stories that go into, if you will, NIAAA folklore, so to speak, with some of the people. Maybe you've got some of those you can share with us.
We used to sit around and Bruce Brown, the late Bruce Brown from Ohio, was a great impersonator, and he would go into some of his mafia movies that were his favorites, and he would have conversations with individual people, and we'd videotape those and have those as a lot of fun. The year we hired Nellie Crocker onto the board, we were at one of the restaurants in Indianapolis. I think it was Manning's restaurant, and having a board dinner, and they had invited Nellie to come along just so she could meet some people and so on. She hadn't started working yet at all, and but they had her along, and Doug Kilgore, the great Doug Kilgore, the virtuoso, an actor, and Bowtie AD was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just told Nellie to play along with this. I was sitting across the table from her, and I said, "Hey, Doug," I said, this is really a stunning revelation here, but it's Nellie's birthday today. And of course, it wasn't. But that was just another opportunity for Doug to get up and sing his famous, I don't even know what language, was it Latin or, whatever, his happy birthday to her. So that was, and she still came to work for him a couple of weeks later. So I guess we didn't scare her off too badly. Um, just great people. And the relaxing times were a lot of fun, and it just got to meet so many excellent people who have become lifelong friends, and it's just been wonderful. So
let me ask you about, and I'm sure there's probably more, but when I think of the legends in Wisconsin, of which you are one of them now, but I think these three fellows are all in the Hall of Fame. Dr. John, obviously Jim Teff, and just last conference, Greg Smith. What's it been like learning from them and working with them all the years? Because they're famous. You and me are maybe not so much, but they're famous.
I'm not in that category, that's for sure. Dr. John Olson had a huge impact on the NIAAA writing and really helping to organize the LTI program. John was a professor at University of Wisconsin in Madison, and there was a short period of time where he became a high school athletic director in the Madison area. I think he was still teaching at Madison at the time, but maybe not full time. And, with his expertise and insight and just love of academia, he really stepped up for the NIAAA, and I'm not sure how he exactly got involved. John Olson and Jim Teff shared something in common. For as strategically important as they were to the NIAAA, neither one of them ever served as a president or on the executive board or as a board member for WADA at all. I think they had X number of hours a week and time to spend, and they chose to spend it with the NIAAA, getting those programs of LTI and the courses and so on off the ground there. So they didn't do a lot of work in Wisconsin officially, but obviously they were huge impact on the NIAAA. John Olson, the thing that always stands out to me about John is he is such a humble guy. When we finally put him into the Hall of Fame for WADA, he just, he would come and, he would be there, but, getting any information out of him as to all of the things he had accomplished in his life and contributions he had made to the NIAAA, that was just all like pulling teeth, because that's just the kind of guy he was. Jim Teff was at South Milwaukee High School. And again, Jim was a bigger than life kind of guy. Unfortunately, passed away quite a while ago already, but is still a legend at South Milwaukee High School, where he was the athletic director and athletic administrator. And I know this, Jim Watkins thought the world of Jim Teff, still does, and he talks about him every chance that he gets. I didn't probably know Jim quite as well as I maybe obviously knew Greg and John, but Jim Teff was really an important figure, a little bit larger than life, as he had a lot of influence with the NIAAA. And Greg Smith, the Bulldog, I see Greg all the time yet, and I'm on the phone with him quite a bit, taking over his position. Greg, for 13 years, served as our executive director in Wisconsin, and Greg just has everything right up here. And I'm trying to survive because have to have it written down kind of guy. So, Greg was in Oregon, the state of Oregon, for a while before he came to Wisconsin at De Pere High School. And then 13 years as our executive director. He's really been the driving force behind our WADA organization, and been so valuable to us as a state organization. Greg's the best.
Thanks for sharing those memories and those stories. Let's have you talk for a minute. And I realize that you're a brand new member to the NEDC, the National Executive Directors Council, but talk about that and talk about your perspective as really being the brand new guy, because you've been around the block once or twice.
Yeah, when I was on the board, Greg Smith had the NEDC, as you remember, in Milwaukee one year. And so my wife and I were kind of the chauffeurs, and we were kind of the co-hosts for the spouses adventures as we went around the city and, cruising in Lake Michigan and to the Pabst Mansion and places like that. And so I got to have a little bit of a taste of the NEDC. And then when I was on the executive board, went to a few of the conferences and so on. So have a great deal of respect, obviously, for the people that are involved there. And, mostly retired ladies and gentlemen who have been in the athletic director seat, so they know what's going on, and a great deal of wisdom. I mean, when people speak in those meetings, people listen because they've been through the wars, they've been through the battles, and they know exactly what they're talking about. So I'm looking forward to starting my official business with you and all the others who are carrying the torch for the NEDC. I do owe Greg Smith one really big thing, and that's that Greg Smith stepped down from his position in the year that he did, because I understand that our first meeting will be in Hawaii next year.
That is correct.
I owe Greg Smith big time for his timing on all of that, but I'm really looking forward to the opportunity. I mean, there are people on that on the NEDC that have just been leaders throughout the country and quite honestly the world, right, in our profession. And so look forward to learning a lot from them and bringing things back from places like Utah and New York and California and wherever it might be to help make our Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association even better. So I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Let's have you talk now for a minute about the recent Orlando conference. We'll put it in perspective. Obviously, we had the online conference, Tampa 2020. Denver, we all got back together with masks. And then we had Nashville, which was a record number. And then I think this Orlando was the second biggest possibly that we've had. So share your observations about that and talk to some of those ADs out there that maybe haven't got to a national conference yet.
Hutch, that's the thing. When I was thinking about this is I wish superintendents and principals could attend once to see the amazing benefits that are available from the NADC conference and what things their athletic directors, their athletic administrators could learn and bring back to their communities. I think that's so critical. I mean, the NIAAA now has membership over 15,000 people strong, which is outstanding. But it's kind of a bummer, I guess, that we, just recently cracked 2,500 people coming to the national conference. And so I really wish we could increase those numbers dramatically. I'd love to put that burden on the latest NIAAA board of, how do we house 6,000 athletic directors instead of 2,500? I'd really love to see that number double. It's an amazing experience, not just the information and the stuff that you bring back, the information from the classes or the mini sessions, but it's the networking to know that if I've got an issue in my state and I know that you've handled it because I talked to you at the NIAAA conference, I'm going to give you a call and see what you did in Utah that was beneficial so that I could probably do that at my school or with my organization to increase things and to make things better. I just wish that we could increase the numbers. And I think it all starts with the superintendents and principals putting a value on freeing up a few dollars so that their ADs can come to that conference. That's really what I would love to see. I think the Florida organizing committee did a great job in Orlando, and they're back on the clock really quick because we're heading back there, I think, in 2 years to Tampa, right? To make up for Lannis Robinson's miss when we all had COVID. But the conference is amazing every year. I always looked forward to it. Great speakers, topics, tireless workers from the NIAAA office and the NFHS. And, I miss Lee Green doing stuff with the legal year in review, but all good things come to an end at some point. And I just think that it's the best leadership training conference that there is. I don't know of any educational conferences that are any better. And I talked to enough people that have gone to superintendents and principals conferences and have attended ours, and just they gush over the NIAAA's conference and what it has to offer. What a great learning experience it is.
Great perspective and wise words. Thanks so much. Let me ask you this, Jeff. What's the favorite part of your job now as the executive director, and before when you were back at Wisconsin Lutheran?
Well, the thing that gave me the most joy was watching coaches and kids succeed. When you have coaches and they were putting in hard work and they were dedicated, and it was just trudging a little bit. And right now, 3 years before I left, we hired a new girls basketball coach at our high school, and he was doing all the right things, right? He had to rebuild some culture, and he didn't have a ton of talent, but he kept to what he believed in, and he worked really hard at it. And this year, 4 years down the road now, he's 16-9, and he's got a pretty high seed in the regional and sectional, and it's just so rewarding to see his hard work paying off, and the kids are having fun, and they're enjoying it, and go to a few games here and there when I can. And it's so different than it was early on when he was trying to build what he's got now. And I think those are the things that I always enjoyed the most, was watching the coaches and the kids succeed. It's especially for me, watching the coaches succeed. The kids were really the responsibility of the coaches, and the coaches were my responsibility. So watching them succeed was really great. I think we ask so much of coaches nowadays. You got to be. I think back to when I started coaching back in the late 1970s. I was not expected to be anybody's parent. I was not expected to be anybody's, mental counselor. I was not expected to know CPR and, how to use, I suppose there weren't any AEDs back in the day, but, all those things that we have, that we demand of coaches nowadays, and we do here in Wisconsin, and I know you do in Utah. It's so beyond just coaching basketball or lacrosse or swimming or whatever it might be. It's having to be everything to them. And, we don't have those guys and women anymore who are coaching 3 sports very often, because we're demanding so much of them in their seasons, right? And then there's the off-season training and the weight training and conditioning and nutrition and all those things. I feel sorry in some ways for the coaches. I know what we're asking of them has to be, but in some regards, I don't think it's what they necessarily were signing up for. My favorite part of the job for WADA so far, I really love working with leaders, and I want the leaders to continue to improve WADA. It's not my show. I'm working for them, and I really want them to be successful and aggressive in making our state association the best it can be, and finding ways to serve athletic directors just beyond putting on a conference once a year. I think our WADA conference is really good, but we're really actively looking for ways to serve our membership in ways other than just a once a year conference. And I think we're making great strides in that area. We've got some things offered now in Wisconsin. We've got law services that are available to athletic administrators should they need it for their duties on the job. And we've got some mental health things that we're working through. Jeremy Schlitz in Madison is on the national conference committee as well. And we're working through some of those mental issues or mental health issues to provide things for our membership. So we're in the infancy of some of those things, but looking forward to that and watching those things grow and prosper. So I'm excited about those things.
Thanks for sharing. Let's finish up with a couple of questions. The first one being, I need Jeff's 2 suggestions for a brand new athletic administrator in order to be successful, and they need to follow your suggestions to gain that success. What would those 2 suggestions be?
I think the first one is to find your rhythm to this life. This is not, I don't know of any other job at a high school that is really the same as an athletic administrator. There's so much to it, and everybody's situation is a little bit different. Some of us as athletic directors are still lining fields, and others have people to do that for them. And some people have 10 sports in their school, other people have 20 sports. And I think really when you become an athletic administrator, to know what you're getting into and to find that rhythm and pace of life, to make it really yours. If you're a person who has to do it all and you can't delegate, being an athletic administrator is going to be a great challenge in your life. And I think I was like that for a lot of time. You have to find those areas of the position where you can let others have leadership opportunities. Sometimes that's hard to let go, right? I mean, we want to do it and we have our standards, and sometimes you just have to develop other leaders to do your job. I was athletic director for 38 years. For 37 years, I did not have an administrative assistant. And I really, excuse me, really didn't have the opportunity for game managers either. If it was a home contest, I was kind of expected to game manage it. And I told our principal, I said, as you're looking for the next person, as I walk out the door here, nobody's going to take this job because maybe of the way I've handled things. And so in my last year, we hired an administrative assistant, and I tried to teach her all the programming things that we had done and so on, so that when the new person took over, she could be of an assistance to him and really be kind of a mentor. And so that worked out really well. And then the school did put in place, a methodology for being able to hire other coaches, teachers, or whatever to do some game managing. And so I think we made the job a little bit more doable, but maybe because of my pigheadedness, it had become kind of an undoable job. And I think, my encouragement to new athletic directors is to find your pace, find your rhythm, know what you're getting involved in, and don't try to do more than is humanly possible in order to get it done. Once you've got your culture created, you need to delegate, and you need to find other people who can help you as you grow leadership. I think, I don't know if, I think it's just, it all comes down to, the personal thing. I don't know if I have a second one or new ADs, but I think you also have to know that when you take on a new position like this, you got to give it a few years. We just were having the discussion today. We kind of mimic the NIAAA's awards with WADA. Mm-hmm. So if you're an AD for 10 years, you get an award, a plaque, and 15 years, 20 years, and whatever. And, last year, I think we had 79 new athletic directors stand up in front of our conference in Wisconsin. So, 79 positions out of 516 schools were brand new. And so how do we keep those people around for more than a year or two? And so I think when you're coming on as an athletic director, you need to have that idea and experience that you got to give it a few years so that you can find that rhythm and balance, so that you know exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to go about doing it, to make that judgment of whether this is something you're going to stay with or not. I don't know that there's any way, as the new executive director in Wisconsin, there have been a couple of times where I've been ready to run out the door already. Just because it's so much. And, Greg Smith had so much of it up here, and I'm having to call him all the time and email him, hey, how'd you do this? And how'd you handle this? But I know that I've got to give it some time. And once things settle down and once I become accustomed to the position, then I think I can move forward and make a decision as to whether, this is a great thing for me, or, what, this doesn't work out. But I think you got to give it some time. And unfortunately, this job is, you got to hit the ground running when you're an athletic director. There is no, there's no grace period to lining it up. That's for sure.
Great insight. Thanks for sharing. We'll finish with this. Jeff, what question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I think you hit them all. This is such a great opportunity to be involved with kids and to watch them grow and the leadership. Most of us who are athletic directors have come out of the coaching world. I don't think I've met too many high school athletic directors who weren't a coach at one point. And I think that, while we're all involved with kids, I think when you take that next step to be athletic director, you got to be involved with the development of coaches. And that means you're dealing with adults instead of kids. And you're meeting, all kinds of different people and, developing your own culture, the things that you want to see happen for kids. It's exciting, but then to be able to control or to handle the coaches that you have. When I started as athletic director at my school, I think I had 7 coaches on the coaching staff that I had played for in high school. And that was really uncomfortable. In sitting down in evaluations with them, some of them probably knew me when I was 7 years old. And now I'm sitting down and evaluating them. That was quite the shock for me and really uncomfortable. But, it's like, who do you inherit? And you inherit all those people that come from different backgrounds and different ideas and different philosophies. And now it's my job as the athletic administrator to get them all on the same page and be working toward common goals. I think that's really an important piece. And I think, who you inherit when you take that job is really important. And, how you handle and deal with adults rather than dealing with kids is something that I was maybe not ready for.
Very well said. On that note, that concludes this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been Jeff Sitz, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association. Thanks so much, Jeff, for being on the podcast.
Hey, Hutch, it's been my pleasure. God bless. Thanks for having me.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.